When I finally stopped spending money on everything I did not need, my entire life became clearer. I saw how much of my time, energy, and attention I've been trading away for objects that added nothing to my days. I learned that most purchases were habits, not choices, and once I stepped back from them, I began to understand what actually mattered to me. Living with less showed me how much noise I had allowed into my life and how quickly that noise disappeared when I stopped feeding it. I became more aware of my surroundings, more protective of my time, and more grateful for simple moments that never cost anything. Cutting my spending was not about deprivation, it was about finally noticing the things that were already enough. And this is where my journey began. Hi, my name is Alex, and minimalism changed my life. So today I'll share with you the main 15 things that happened to my life, especially the 11th thing was the most unexpected. So leave a like and let's start. When I stopped spending money, the first thing that hit me was how much of the world around me felt like clutter. It was as if my eyes had finally opened after years of living in a fog. I suddenly noticed the piles of objects people bought and abandoned without a second thought. I remember walking through thrift stores and estate sales and feeling surrounded by things that once meant something to someone, but were now sitting unwanted on dusty shelves. It felt almost like walking through the leftovers of other people's hopes and habits. And as I looked around, I realized that I used to treat my own life the same way. I treated buying as a default behavior and not as an intentional decision. When I cut my spending almost to zero, the noise fell away and the truth rose to the surface. Most of what we buy becomes clutter. Most of what we spend our money on becomes something we try to forget. And standing in the middle of all that clutter, I began asking myself why I ever felt the need to add more to it. You can feel that question too when you stop spending because you start to see the world not as a marketplace, but as a landscape covered in things no one truly needs. The second thing that happened when I stopped spending money was that I finally understood the real price of the things I used to buy. People talk about saving money, but what shook me deeper was realizing that every object I once paid for represented hours of my life, hours of work, hours of energy, hours I could never get back. When you look around your room and you see items you barely use and then imagine the hours you traded away for them, something begins to shift inside you. You start to understand that clutter is not only physical but emotional. I felt that heavily when I stopped buying. I saw my old habits clearly for the first time. I saw how quickly I exchanged my time for small bursts of pleasure that faded faster than the receipts could crumple. And when this truth sinks in, you stop looking at money as just money. You start seeing it as time. And because time is limited, you naturally become more protective of it. You think twice, you pause, you breathe, and in that pause, you begin to build a different kind of life. The third thing that shifted in my life was my definition of wealth. Before I became more frugal, I believed wealth meant having more. More clothes, more gadgets, more shoes, more decorations, more status. But when I stopped buying things, I realized that wealth is not about accumulation, but about freedom. For the first time, I understood that wealth is the ability to walk into a grocery store and know you can afford what you need. Wealth is the ability to rest instead of panic. It is the quiet moment when you wake up in the morning and know you are not drowning in debt or fear. It is time with the people you care about. It is an evening at home without anxiety. Wealth is peace. Like, when I cut my spending, my relationship with money changed from wanting to show it to wanting to protect my life with it. Money became something that helped me breathe instead of something that helped me buy. And once you feel that shift inside yourself, you cannot unfeel it. You carry it with you into every decision. The fourth thing I noticed was that I stopped caring about status the way I used to. When you spend less, you begin to see how much of your old spending was really about impressing others. I used to buy nicer clothes because I wanted people to think well of me. I used to look at what others owned and wonder if I was falling behind. But when I stopped spending, I lost interest in that comparison. I cared more about comfort than appearance. I cared more about the function of an object than the brand printed on it. And that shift felt incredibly freeing because I no longer felt tied to expectations that were quietly shaping my choices. I learned that you can only wear one pair of shoes at a time. You can only carry one bag at a time. You can only sleep in one bed at a time. When you embrace that simple truth, you stop needing a life full of options that only stress you out. You begin valuing the life you actually live instead of the image you once tried to project. The fifth thing that happened was that marketing and advertising stopped working on me. It was strange because I did not expect this shift, but the more I avoided buying, the more distance I created between myself and the messages constantly telling me I needed more. I began seeing ads the same way you see a magician's trick once you understand the mechanics behind it. You stop being pulled in. You stop believing the illusion. I could walk past displays that once tempted me and feel nothing. I could scroll through social media without wanting to add anything to my cart. It was like building an invisible shield. The wants that used to feel urgent became quiet, the impulses softened, and I realized that what I once thought were my own desires were often just manufactured cravings planted by companies that wanted my money. The moment you understand that you take your power back, you become harder to influence. You become calmer inside. The sixth thing I discovered was the surprising beauty of waiting for something used to feel annoying or restrictive. But once I stopped spending, I began to feel something new in the space created by waiting. I learned that when I allow myself time to think, the majority of my urges disappear. I learned that waiting allows my wants to filter themselves. If a desire survives the waiting period, it might be worth exploring. If not, I let it go. This practice taught me self-control in a gentle way. It taught me patience. It taught me that time reveals the truth behind every want. And through that process, I became my own guarantee because every purchase I eventually made was one I felt fully confident about. When you master waiting, you stop fearing that you are missing out. Instead, you feel grounded and intentional. And that feeling is worth more than anything you could buy on impulse. The seventh thing that unfolded in my life was the realization that my world was full of small emotional triggers disguised as innocent temptations. I used to see cute items, holiday displays, limited editions, or nostalgic objects and feel instant joy. But when I stopped spending, I started noticing the machinery behind these moments. They were not simply charming, they were designed to make me take out my wallet. This awareness was uncomfortable at first. It felt like losing a bit of innocence, but with time, it helped me build a more honest relationship with the world. I began recognizing what was real and what was manufactured, and although I still appreciate beauty and creativity, I no longer confuse them with the need to buy something. This freed me from patterns I did not even know were shaping my behavior. It allowed me to enjoy seasonal moments for what they actually are instead of what companies wanted them to be. The eighth thing that changed in my life was how I approached holidays and celebrations. Before spending less, I used to overcomplicate everything. I bought too many decorations. I bought gifts out of pressure. I tried to create a perfect scene instead of a meaningful experience. But once I simplified my spending, I discovered that holidays feel richer when they are quieter. I used fewer decorations. I focused on experiences with people rather than objects. My stress levels dropped, my joy increased, and I noticed my family enjoyed the simplicity too. The absence of clutter created space for presence. And you start to realize that holidays were never meant to be displays of abundance, but reminders of connection. When you strip away the excess, you find the heart of the moment. You find the real part, and that real part is enough. The ninth thing that shifted inside me was my sensitivity to misalignment. When you live more simply, you start noticing faster when something does not fit your values or your energy. I became quicker to say no to books I did not enjoy, food that did not taste good, or experiences that drained me. I no longer forced myself through anything just because I started it or paid for it. That mindset removed a surprising amount of stress from my life. I learned that stopping is not failure. Stopping is self-respect. This awareness slowly reshaped my habits. It helped me release expectations that were weighing me down. It taught me to trust my instincts and to protect my peace. When you stop spending, you become more honest with yourself because you stop covering misalignment with distractions. The 10th thing that happened was that emergencies became less frightening. I grew up knowing what financial fear felt like. I knew what it meant to worry about medical bills and unexpected problems. But when I reduced my spending and saved more, I began building a safety net. And that safety net changed everything. When something happened to me or someone I cared about, I could respond instead of panic. That shift is something many people underestimate. Peace is not bought through possessions, it is built through preparation. And when you do not spend as much, you have more available for situations that truly matter. Living frugally gave me a kind of emotional security that I did not expect, but deeply needed. The 11th thing I began noticing was what I now call the obsession curve. Whenever I got interested in buying something, I felt an intense rush at the beginning. I used to confuse that rush with necessity, but when I stopped spending money, I learned to watch that curve rise and fall without acting on it. It always faded, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, but it always faded. Recognizing that pattern saved me from countless unnecessary purchases. It showed me that cravings are rarely stable. They are waves, and if you wait long enough, the wave passes. The moment you learn this, your relationship with desire changes. You stop believing every want is meaningful. You start letting your mind settle, and a settled mind buys far less. The 12th thing I experienced was a growing sense of gratitude and generosity. When you stop spending on yourself, you begin to see how little you actually need. And when your needs shrink, your capacity to give grows. I started noticing opportunities to help people in small ways. I found myself wanting to tip more when someone worked hard. I felt more patience, more softness, more awareness. Frugality is often misunderstood as stinginess, but in reality, it frees up resources for generosity. When you are no longer controlled by your own wants, you have more to offer others. And the act of giving feels more meaningful because it comes from genuine intention rather than obligation. The 13th thing that unfolded was the return of my hobbies. When I removed shopping from my daily life, I realized how much time I had been spending browsing, comparing, researching, and consuming. All of that time came back to me. And with that time, I rediscovered reading, cooking, walking, and quiet evenings. I realized that my life had been full, but not fulfilled. And the absence of constant spending allowed me to reconnect with small joys I had forgotten. You start to understand that the richest parts of life are often free. They require attention, not money. And that realization slowly builds a deeper appreciation for simple pleasures. The 14th thing I noticed was how frugality slowly rewired my thinking. My mind shifted from craving more to appreciating enough. I stopped seeing life as a series of purchases. I began seeing it as a series of moments. This mindset change was not dramatic, but steady. Each day, I felt myself becoming calmer. I felt less urgency, less comparison, less noise. You learn that frugality is not restriction, it is clarity. It is the choice to remove what distracts you so you can focus on what matters. And once your mind adapts to that way of living, you find a sense of contentment that buying could never create. The 15th thing that happened to me was internal peace. Not a loud or dramatic peace, but a quiet one that grows slowly and stays. When you stop spending money, you also stop chasing things that do not serve you. You stop trying to fill emptiness with objects. You begin living with intention instead of impulse. And over time, that creates a deep stillness. You feel more present in your life. You feel more in control. And you finally understand that enough is a place you can reach, not a finish line that keeps moving. that realization is powerful because it frees you from the endless cycle of wanting more. So when I look back on this journey, I see not a year of restriction, but a year of rediscovery. I learned who I am without the noise of constant consumption. I learned how much lighter life feels when you remove everything that does not matter. And I want you to know that you can feel that too. You do not have to change everything at once. You can start with one pause, one decision, one moment of awareness. And as you begin to slow down your spending, you may find the same quiet freedom I discovered. A freedom built not on buying more, but on needing less. A life shaped not by what you own, but by what you value. If you feel the desire to simplify your world, I hope my story helps you take the first small step toward a calmer and more intentional way of living. If so, let me know with a like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Just a reminder, I'm not a financial advisor. This video is for educational purposes only, and any results depends on your decision and actions.